Senator Boner,
Here.
Senator Case,
Present.
Senator Nethercott. Here. Senator Scott.
I'm not sure whether I'm here or not.
Chairman Driscoll.
Here. Okay, we'll take up a continuation of Senate File 145. Sponsored done his prime end of the testimony, and we were going to start the morning with the clerks. I don't know if we have anybody either here in the room or online representing the clerks.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mary Langford online. She's in the webinar now.
Perfect. Welcome, Ms. Langford.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Are you ready for me to proceed?
Yes, ma'am. I assume you've been following the bill, and sponsors have done testimony, and you're the first testimony outside of the sponsors.
Yes, sir. I have probably two more clerks that would like to join us today. Clerk Bartlett from Carbon County, as well as Clerk Freeze from Fremont County. They may be in your waiting room.
We will admit them if they're there. If not, they can follow you. If you'd like to do it all together, we'll admit you all in.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, they're in the room.
Let's go ahead and let them in, please. Ms. Langford, you're happy to do all three of you together?
Yes, I am. That would be perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Perfect.
And with that, I'll go ahead and start. I'm Mary Langford, and I have the honor of representing the Wyoming County Clerks Association. With me at the virtual table today is the Honorable Julie Freeze, Fremont County Clerk, and the Honorable Gwen Bartlett, Carbon County Clerk. Our purpose today is to focus on the administration of Wyoming elections, void of political influence and pressure. Wyoming elections have integrity, and they are well run due to the dedication of 23 county clerks, their staff, with hundreds of committed volunteers and the support of state and local elected officials. The clerks appreciate the opportunity to review drafts and provide to the development of legislation. The County Clerks Association would like to take this opportunity to thank the sponsors of this legislation, Senators Beitman, Boner, and Salazar, and Representatives Hunt, Jennings, and Zwanitzer for reaching out to the members of our association and to the members of the County Clerks Association who have participated in the review of this proposed legislation. We have two major concerns. First being redistricting. The Wyoming legislative redistricting of the state of Wyoming will be conducted in the 2022 session of the legislature, which begins on February 14th, 2022, and ends about March 14th, 2022. At the conclusion of the session, that information will be provided to Wyoming's 23 counties for implementation. Chapter 7 of the Election Code, Districts and Precinct Hearings, provides that districts and precinct hearings are required to be completed by the first meeting of the Board of County Commissioners in May of 2022 with prior public notice. There will be changes to accommodate redistricting, and voters are required to be notified by mail if they have a new precinct. Local redistricting is also conducted, such as county commissioners' districts in Fremont County and school district trustee areas. All new boundaries are entered into Wild Ridge. This information needs to be in place before candidates file for office. After applying all of the necessary functions to the statutory dates, there is not enough time for a May primary and no margin for error. Redistricting needs to be completed before starting the clock for a primary. There is not enough time for a runoff election in 2022, and we have not considered the impacts of H.R. 1, which has passed the U.S. House and is currently in the U.S. Senate, or any other election legislation that may pass this legislature. Our second concern, of course, is cost. Currently, the administration of elections in Wyoming is paid for by its 23 counties. The estimated cost of the runoff election is $1.1 million, based on information provided by county clerks for the 2020 primary election. It is anticipated that the addition of another election will require additional staffing as county clerks are working on county budgets during the second quarter of the calendar year. As you know, counties are suffering from the same budget issues as the state of Wyoming. You have already heard from the Secretary of State that approximately $185,000 will be needed to update WyoReg to accommodate the requirements of a runoff election. Where will the funding come for this additional election? In our talking points that we provided to you on page 2, Senate File 145 needs at least a dozen changes for the administration of a runoff election. And we've listed those on page 22, and it's page 2, and it's a complete list of questions that we have about the bill. I can continue with those questions or those concerns, or maybe we should just cut to the chase here. A runoff election would require major changes to the election statutes in a regular election year, then add in the 2022 redistricting. Members of the County Clerks Association with the Secretary of State's office have conversed and collaborated on the timetable and the requirements to accommodate redistricting and a third election. A real effort has been made by trying different timetables for absentees, early voting, and other time-saving efforts, which could jeopardize the integrity of our Wyoming elections. It's too big of a lift in a redistricting year. The county clerks are unable to develop a timetable to accommodate the requirements of this bill. The County Clerks Association believes that time equals integrity and would be happy to continue this conversation and participate in an interim study to produce the comprehensive changes required to administer a runoff election. And Mr. Chairman, we're prepared to stand for question.
Questions, committee? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chair. Be late with the census information. We need to do the redistricting. We won't get it till the fall. Now, we'll still hopefully get it done and get it passed in the budget session. The question for the county clerks is, does that complicate things or not in terms of the census information being late and the committee work being relatively, therefore, hurried, and you may have less time to prepare ahead of the session? Or does it not make any difference because we'll get it done during the session anyhow?
Chairman and Senator Scott, we have really not taken into consideration that the census data could possibly not be to you until the end of September, as was reported by the Secretary of State's office, which, as you know, really puts a crunch on joint corporations to do the necessary public information and transparency that the public expects during this redistricting process. And I don't know if there's any opportunity for that information in the bill that's required to go to the legislative session to have any leeway. We based our decision on the fact that we hope that we have direction from the legislature by the middle of March. And that is a pretty fast run for us to be able to even be prepared to administer the two elections that we currently are required to do, let alone to lay another election on it that would start with a May primary. There's just not enough time.
Any further questions? I guess I have one, and I'm not sure you can answer, but are we risking going to lower voter turnout by adding another election every year? That's probably my biggest concern is if you go in, you're just constantly running, and do we have a risk of actually lowering voter turnout?
Mr. Chairman, we've read some information that's provided by the National Conference of State Legislators, and you folks may read that same information also. There are three concerns that are expressed concerning runoff elections, one of them being the cost and one of them being the turnout. According to the studies that they have done, the turnout is less for that than it would be for a primary. Typically, your primary election is a lower turnout than your general election, and a runoff election would be similar to a primary election or less, according to information that we have read.
And then last, I think we had a little testimony on maybe how many of our statewide races, roughly just off the hip, would have needed a runoff one way or the other the last decade or so? Do you have any ideas on that?
Mr. Chairman, if you would call on Clerk.
Okay. Bartlett, Ms. Bartlett, thank you. Can you hear me, Ms. Bartlett?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this is Julie Freeze, Fremont County Clerk. I did ask the Secretary of State that question, and I'm looking really quick here to see if I can find his answer to that. I want to say roughly at least one candidate over the last, I asked him to look at 10 years worth of history on that. And I think he had at least one almost every year, but it's like one, not like several in a particular year. And if I can find that, I will let you know exactly what he reported on that. That was quite a while ago that I asked him that question.
Perfect.
And I also wanted to address a little bit what Senator Scott asked. So as mentioned by Mary about redistricting, just in general, Fremont County has the only commissioner districts in the state. So while you are doing legislative work, we're dovetailing at the same time, trying to follow, because we really can't do anything until you're done. And just in general for all the county clerks. So when we get done, when everybody gets done with all the lines and everybody's happy and it's passed and everything, the work then begins for the county clerks. There's a number of things that we need to get done. So when you move these lines, as you know, voters get moved into different districts, and sometimes we have to make sure at the county level, well, not sometimes, always have to make sure at the county level, we aren't pigeonholing a couple of people in like a district by themselves so that people know how they voted. So we have to be very careful to maybe move our precinct lines, and we'll have to offer those to the county commissioners for approval. So there's still a process that we have to do that. We have to change everything in our address library, which some of that stuff can be done globally in your computer, but a lot of that has to be hand work manually, changing voters. And that's a lot of changes for some. We did ask the clerks how much time they thought they would take to get their address libraries changed. And it was anywhere from 1 week, depending on the county, to clear up to 30 days. And we hope that we would be done with that at that time, because it's a laborious task for us to do, but it's very important and we have to be very careful. Once we get that done, we have to send notices out to our voters that, hey, you might have been changed into a different district. So I just kind of wanted to say, I agree with Senator Scott. I think when you're going to get the information late at the legislative level, obviously that's got to put a lot of pressure on your legislators to get a plan done, which then also pushes down to us. And we just know that's a long process with, we generally like to have public hearings around the state. That may not happen if you have that information coming to you so late. So I just wanted to add those pieces to that.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Freeze or clerks?
Mr. Chairman, I did find Kai's stuff. In 2010, there would have been a governor, Democrat and Republican, and a superintendent Republican running in a runoff. In 2012, nothing. In 2014, the U.S. Senator race Democrat, Secretary of State Republican, Superintendent of Public Instruction Republican would have been up at a runoff. 2016 would have been the U.S. Rep Republican, 2018 would have been governor Republican. And in 2020, it would have been the US Senator Democrat. So that's what you have in the last 10 years.
Perfect, thank you. Further questions, committee? As usual, you guys are great resources. Thank you very much. You're appreciated. We have anybody from county commissioners here? I know we got one in the back. Would you like to address this, Mr. Novotny?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Bill Novotny, on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. As you may or may not be aware, for the Commissioners Association to take a position on any piece of legislation, at least 70% of our 93 commissioners across the state have to vote in favor of that position. With that, it was the determination of the County Commissioners Association to oppose Senate File 145. Our opposition rests in the fact that this would be an unfunded mandate on the counties. Unless the legislature is prepared to appropriate the funds necessary to conduct a third election, we are not in a position to take on any additional liabilities. Obviously, it also does raise some concerns when you move a primary season into what is statutorily set out for us in our budget process, which has to begin in May and be concluded by the third Monday in July. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that is the position of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Novotny? Seeing none, thank you. It's kind of out of the standard list. We'll go to the next person out of the crowd that'd like to come up and address us. And what do we have in the waiting room? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, right now we have Mr. Ken Hamilton waiting to come into the room.
Let's go ahead and do Mr. Hamilton and then we'll go out here if that's. I can't see through the glass.
That's ridiculous.
What?
Next week, we take these screens down.
Welcome, Mr. Hamilton. Good to see you.
Good morning,
You're on
Mr.
mute.
Chairman.
There we go.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this. Does everyone hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
The Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, I represent them, has a policy that we've had since 1986, supporting a primary runoff type of a election process. And while I know there's some logistics to be solved in Senate File 145, I really do appreciate those members who have brought this bill, because we've been trying to advocate for this position for over 35 years, which I know a lot of us have a tendency to look back at the last 2 or 3 elections and use that to color our judgment. But in those 35 years, we've had a number of discussions about this, and our policy has not changed. So our membership consists of agriculture producers, about 2,500 members, and they've adopted this policy through our process. So I would say that there is some popular support to go ahead and move forward with a primary runoff election. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if I could.
Any questions for Mr. Hamilton? Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Okay, we'll go back out to the audience and probably just first come, first serve. Oh, Senator Salazar, you actually should have been at the head of the list. My apology.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. I just want to quickly make a couple comments. This is an idea that
Is your mic on?
it is, sir.
Okay, and then you have to introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm State Senator Tim Salazar from Senate District 26, Fremont County.
Welcome.
And I'm
Thank you.
thank you. I'm a co-sponsor on this bill. First of all, I'd like to piggyback that at least in my Senate district, there is popular support for this. I've heard from my constituents. That's why I put my name on this bill. Secondly, I'd like to make the comment that perhaps to alleviate some of the concerns of this bill, an idea that that the committee might want to take up is simply removing the state legislative races from this bill and keeping it to a federal and statewide race inclusion to this bill, if that in any way alleviates some concerns. Finally, I'd like to simply state, Mr. Chairman, that this is an idea that I have supported for years, not just this year. I supported this when I represented my House district some years ago. So I simply wanted to bring that up as a co-sponsor of the bill. And thank you for allowing me to testify, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Senator Salazar?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if, Senator, would it be possible maybe to have a delayed implementation date of the legislative race runoffs? Just to try to ease as we go forward. So have it be for the major statewide races and then manipulate the effective date on the other part so that that doesn't happen until the next election cycle. So we could kind of walk before we run. It's just a suggestion.
No, Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, I think that's an option for the committee. I do, because personally, I'm not on this bill to target any particular individual or race. It's the policy of how we run elections here in Wyoming is what I'm concerned about. So if the committee were to extend that timeline to give a smoother transition period, I think that's something that the committee should consider. So,
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad to talk to my fellow co-sponsors here. You know, the more I listen to all the concerns, to include the logistical concerns and the fiscal concerns like we just heard about, what's your thoughts on say a ranked choice primary? If you're familiar with that, where everybody goes down and says, here's my number one choice, my number two, number three, number four. There's been some discussion of that in general, but you think that would alleviate these concerns without having the increased cost of an extra election?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Boner, I guess that's something that the committee should look at. I guess, to be honest, that particular aspect I haven't thought a lot about, but I'm someone, as you all are, that everything is on the table. You should look at it. And if the committee feels it's comfortable in that regard, then that's a dialogue that should be carried through. So.
Committee. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I swear I'm going to bring in a farm hammer to deal with these microphones one of these days. Mr. Chairman, general question, either for Mr. Salazar or anybody who knows, on the ranked choice issue, was that what Maine has tried in the past few years, and what was their experience? I've heard some rumblings that they tried a new system, and I thought it was ranked choice and had some problems with them, but I really don't know what their experience was.
Senator Salazar, do you know anything?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question.
No,
Further questions? I've got one. Back to the money. What is your thoughts on how we make our counties whole? We're constantly cutting and chiseling. And in fact, this year we did another 10% cut to them. How's your thoughts on how we go about funding this? Because it's even on the state budget level, $1 million is probably worth more now than it was a few years ago to us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I don't like unfunded mandates. I know that in Fremont County, at least my county commissioners are making incredibly difficult decisions. And so it would be my opinion that I would look to the state in some regard. But that is why Senator Case's comments of perhaps moving this out on the dates a bit may alleviate the cost to some extent, but The bottom line, Mr. Chairman, is if it is a good public policy, as I think it is for the voters of this state, then we'll find the means. And if it's not a good idea, we shouldn't fund it in the first place. So,
Good answer, and thank you. That's, any further questions for Senator Salazar?
Mr. Chairman, I have a response for Senator Scott about the ranked choice primary. It was most recently put in Alaska, and it is used in Maine. I had understood it that Washington, Oregon had a form of it, or Washington State did, but I guess that's just pending. It's used in a lot of municipal elections, lots of big municipalities, including New York City, and it's been used for Democratic caucuses in 4 states. So it definitely is gaining ground. I think it would be fun to look at whether it'd be cheaper to implement than a separate runoff and yet achieve the same results. The time might be right for it.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Salazar.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, and I appreciate those comments. You know the intent of this bill, and I would encourage the committee to look at all options to get to that end, rather than simply not looking at the intent. And I know all of you will look at that, and so appreciate that.
Thank you. Further questions, Senator Salazar? Thank you. Come forward. Welcome, Ms. Simons.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Senators. My name is Gail Simmons. I run a blog, Civics 307. It's a nonpartisan blog on the legislature. I'm actually partly that and just a citizen from Sheridan County. I sent you a handout last night. I think that you may have seen this before. I went into the Secretary of State data and looked at both primary and election participation and general election participation. And what you will see is that as the number of eligible citizens increases, we're now at around 450,000. The participation in the primary is taking a downward trend. It tends to go up and down, both in the primary and the general, depending on whether the cycle is for the presidential elections or whether it is for the gubernatorial elections. And frankly, it's usually higher in the presidential rather than the 5 electeds of the state. So you can see that just visually, you can see the primary election goes down and the general goes up and down and up and down. But we get over 100%, and that is driven in the general, the participation that is driven by, I think starting in 2000, the cleansing of the voting polls, because we do have probably the highest integrity of any election state elections that we have. And so part of that is if somebody does not vote in the general in one cycle and they do not respond, they get pulled from the polls. So when individuals who do not vote in the primary come in, they have to re-register. So that's really the driver of that. And then there's one where you can simply see on the overall registration, it's actually driven more by the Republicans going up and down than the other parties. So that is the first thing. In the 2020 primary results, overall, across all parties, the participation rate was only 61% of those registered at that time. What that means is that 89,790 registered voters did not vote in the primary. Now, almost all of them voted in the general. And by the way, when I do this data, I take it down to the voter ID level. I'm not just looking at the overall. I'm literally comparing at the voter ID basis. For the Republicans, only 64% of the registered Republicans voted in the 2020 primary. That means that 60,590 registered Republicans did not vote in the primary. And I can tell you that 2020 was less than 2018. So we're not successfully encouraging people to exercise their franchise. That is a way bigger problem than some requirement that we have majority. On top of that, I would another indicator that I would say is important is that a question was asked, why now? At least part of it is I know that the state GOP has a resolution asking for these. And I would just like to point out that in the party positions, the precinct that are the grassroots, in 2020, of those Republicans who actually picked up a ballot, so that's the 64%, only 40.6% cast a vote for precinct people. That means that the results at the precinct level reflect only 25% of the Republicans in the state. In 2018, only 37.8% cast a ballot. Now, a lot of these are because they're empty positions, but that's, to my point, it's beside the point. And again, it was 25% of the Republicans. So if we're going to place an argument that it's not valid if you only have 33%, well, then I'd say that 25% is even less. Now, as to the popular vote, I would like to point out that while it's a little bit different, we argue against popular vote at the presidential because we are the United States, we're not the United people. But you can't use the argument of not having a popular vote on one and then state that you want a popular vote on another. So having a majority rather than a plurality, I lose the logic of that. I would also like to point out that our primaries are for the parties. And I believe that, because I believe in the principles of my party, I believe that most folks should and would align with the party that I align with. But I allow for those who do not, as strange as I find that. But it is their right. In Great Britain and Israel, their executive is selected by the majority of party. I reject that as well. So the point was made about ranked choice primary. We don't do that very much in the United States, but I would like to point out that it is used by every voter in Australia, Ireland, New Zealand, Malta, North Ireland, and Scotland. So there is a lot of data out there outside of the United States on ranked choice voting. My goal, I think all of our goals should be that those individuals who get elected represent everybody, not just those who voted for them, but everybody. Your oaths, our oaths of office, are to our Constitution and to the citizens of the United States. And then in 2018, I would also like to point out that it was brought up, and I've seen this on other sites, about the fact that our current executive only received 33% of those who registered, who actually voted. And the implication or the statement is made that therefore we have an executive who does not reflect the state. And I would like to remind everyone that in 2019, prior to the pandemic that threw everything in, our executive enjoyed being the #1 most approved governor in the United States. That flies in the face of 33%, meaning 72% don't like him. I just reject that. So we have an issue of cost. I'm not going to go into that again, but again, unfunded mandates. We have an issue of timing, and to have everybody in the state have their every other year life upturned because one election each year falls into this criteria simply doesn't make sense. And then finally, and the biggest one, and I thank you, Chairman, for bringing it up, is the idea of participation. And so the timing for this is both problematic in terms of redistricting. It's problematic in terms of how do we force a primary that already has poor participation earlier into the year so that we can accommodate, because maybe one election is driving it. So I urge you to vote this down. I think it's worthy because of the concerns. I think it's worthy to have sorry, that's mine. I forgot to put it on mute. It's worthy of an interim, and it's worthy taking a look at ranked choice votings. And so with that, I stand for questions.
And I'm looking for a way we can work with this. It seems, my understanding is that what's driving the lengthy times is the federal regulation on the military and overseas voting, which requires that 45-day period. What would be the possibility in your judgment of experimenting with a runoff primary in just the governor's race, where we are very likely to need one based on past history, and having it within a couple of weeks of the primary and keeping to a much more traditional time schedule? In your judgment, is that a feasible thing? It would mean we wouldn't comply with that federal regulation. We wouldn't have to in a strictly state election. Or are we losing too many voters that way? And does it not achieve enough of the goals?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I am a retired military officer from the U.S. Navy, and for 17 years, I voted. I did not miss a single election, either primary or general. The voting for the executive of the state is every bit as important to me as voting for the Secretary of State, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, the legislators, the counties, because I kept my ties there. To split this off because one time in the last 10 years, we have an issue with the results of the governor's election is just bad policy. And so I back to, we need to have policies that encourage participation, not try to tie ourselves into knots, trying to, in a manner that strains the credibility of our elections, how well they're written or how well they're managed, that strains the resources of our clerks and our counties. I just don't see that. But it's worth the conversation. Bring it up in the interim. Now is not the time, and we do not have enough information.
I would like to say that I really thank witness for being blunt about how she feels. No, it's a big help to us here. when people aren't blunt and we have to figure it out, it's a lot harder. So I really appreciate that. And also for having cogent reasons for why she felt the way she did. That too is a big help.
Thank you. And I'm usually so damn good.
Mr. Chairman, Gwen Bartlett raised her hand again to come into the webinar. Mr. Chairman, we also have Mr. Chris Merrill as well.
Let's go ahead and go to Mr. Merrill and then we'll come back to Ms. Bartlett. Mr. Merrill, are you on?
Something to be said for in-person meetings.
Oh,
I am, just a sec here.
This is a little frustrating. There we go. There's Mr. Merrill. Welcome.
Sorry, I just had to inform my kid who's home from school that I'm going to be testifying and to asked him to quiet down.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Merrill, the Executive Director of the Equality State Policy Center. I just want to say this is a great topic, and I think it would also be a great interim topic, in my opinion. And I just want to chime in to say that, you know, if you're looking to establish runoff elections, ranked choice voting could be a cheaper and much more elegant way of accomplishing this than what's outlined in this proposed legislation. In the case of a primary or general election with multiple candidates, ranked choice voting creates what's known as an instant runoff. And it does this because it allows voters to thoroughly express their preferences in one election on one day on one ballot. So when you fill out a ranked choice voting ballot, we're not forced just to pick one candidate and move on. We can rather rank the candidates on the ballot in order of our preference. So in a hypothetical election, I could say that my first choice would be Senator Nethercott, of course. But if tragically she didn't receive enough votes, if she didn't receive enough votes to win, I could say that my second choice would be Senator Case, my third choice, Chairman Driscoll, etc. This is just imaginary, of course. In the real world, it would be impossible to choose between you all. But the point is,
that's pretty close to the way it works for me.
But I think it could be a better option for voters. If a candidate receives, you know, more than half of the first choice votes from voters, then that candidate would win just like in any other election. But if there's no majority winner after counting the first choices, the race is then decided by this instant runoff option, and it's likely less expensive, better for voters because you need only to go to the ballot on one day to let your preferences be known, and also better for election officials, volunteers at the polls, and candidates. So, Mr. Chairman, we hope that as this committee considers this bill before you today and the possibility of runoff elections in general, you might also consider ranked choice voting, which could likely achieve the goals of the bill in a more efficient way in a single election. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude my testimony, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Merrill? I think you got Senator Nethercott's vote, so. Thank you. Is Ms. Bartlett able to get on, or are we gonna? There she is. Welcome, Ms. Bartlett. Hopefully we can hear you this time. We've been trying to hear from you all morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about my earlier audio issues. I couldn't get it to unmute. My name's Gwen Bartlett. I'm the Carbon County Clerk. And I wanted to talk about a couple things, including Senator Salazar's point about potentially removing legislative districts from this bill, and that would probably fix the redistricting issue, but unfortunately, we don't feel it does. We make one ballot with federal, state, legislative, county, municipal, all of those all of those races on that one ballot. And so just because legislative races might not be eligible for a runoff, we still are going to have those districts set to have them on a primary election ballot on the same ballot as the other races. So we still can't start any earlier than we know those districts and complete our redistricting tasks. I hope that makes sense. So I don't know that that helps the issue. My office did spend a considerable amount of time this week working through a timeline of all the tasks that clerks have to complete to run elections. We tried to push the primary from the proposed May 3rd date to May 17th. We went out to the end of May, but then you're talking, conflicts with Memorial Day, either on the Tuesday after the 4th or 5th Monday. We went into June, and even with June, we still only would have 2 weeks to complete redistricting tasks and have those ballots ready, address changes. So it creates an issue on the front end, but then also on the back end with the June election, you still only have 2 weeks to prepare for a runoff election in August. And that is because we would have those absentees. We have to have 30 days to enter election day voter registration. Some of our counties take that entire 30 days and need an additional time so that, the primary ends, and then you have to have that additional time for us to enter those election day voter registrations to see who's even eligible to vote in the runoff. During that 2 weeks after the primary election, we're still having to code ballots, which means kind of design the ballot and make sure all the right races are with the right precinct. We've got to order those from our printer. We have a back and forth proofing process for that. They've got to be shipped to us. We've got to be working on stuffing ballots to mail them out by July 1st for an August runoff. And so, as you can see, it's a lot of weight to put on clerks, and I think we would be setting ourselves up for potential failure, and I don't think that's anybody's intention. Did also want to mention that years ago, I remember being in a committee meeting where it was talked about, and I think it was joint corporations, I can't recall, but it was talked about a presidential primary. And I think if that's something, I'm not proposing that happen, but if an interim study were completed, that's something that could be looked at for Wyoming if the policymakers are still interested. I think our election code is just too vast to complete such large changes in this very short time. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Ms. Bartlett, thinking just totally out of the box, what do you think the obstacles to implementing ranked choice voting would be? I mean, do you have any speculation how that could happen? Could our current technology accommodate it somehow now?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, I believe our current technology can. As you know, the entire state is now with one single vendor, and it's my belief that we can accomplish that. I was afraid you were going to ask me this question, and to be honest, I haven't studied ranked choice voting to the degree to be able to answer your questions about, implementation on such a short timeline. I think it could be accomplished with further study.
So, Mr. Chairman, it would obviously be significant if that voting technology that we've adopted statewide could handle multiple selections and maintain the order from the voter. And I suspect that they might be, because a lot of elections already have vote for two and things like that. But to handle the ranking part, could they maintain the ranking in a way that, that's the question. And it could be a wonderful solution to this problem that maintains your timelines, gives the voters what they want, and gives us better elections. Just a thought.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Ms. Bartlett.
Thank you. Senator Case, I think the Clerks Association is open to, to any changes and implementing those as the policymakers see fit. We just need time to study that and look at it. But I am told by the other clerks that our current software and equipment can accommodate ranked choice voting. I don't know that personally. I'm just beginning to learn, coding and that software myself. So, but I believe it can accomplish it.
Thank you very much for the answer, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Bartlett, one question. We've got one vendor. Please tell me it's not Dominion. Who is our vendor?
Mr. Chairman, it's ES&S, election systems.
It is who?
Election systems and software. They go by ES and S.
Perfect. Thank you. Dominion was not going to be the right answer. Thank you very much. Welcome to
Chairman,
corporations.
Can you hear me?
I can, well.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Darren Smith, and I want to thank you. First of all, on behalf of, I'm a citizen. I'm here on my own behalf, on behalf of my friends and family, and we want to thank you. You deserve combat pay, you and all the legislators in this room during this cycle. And with that, we have hard times that we're facing in Wyoming. And because of that, when a leader goes into a statewide office, they need a mandate. And this would provide that. I mean, there's always a lot of conjecture. Well, they got 30%, but would they have won if it was if there weren't so many people in the race and things like that? And this would solve that. It just flat out solves it. In the governor's race 2 years ago, we actually had, I know it'll cost like 1.1 million is what the Secretary of State said. But in the governor's race, we had 4 candidates that spent more money than that in the election. And what we found if you look at, there's just tons of data, it's not even arguable, but guess who wins in a statewide race? The person who spends the most money wins most of the time. And because of that, this would solve anybody being able to come in and buy an election. So like, if any of you would ever like to run for a statewide race, you wouldn't have to spend $2-3 million. You could actually have a chance to win a statewide race. So there was one other point I wanted to make, and it was this. I know there's been a lot of talk about redistricting, and I talked to the Secretary of State yesterday, Ed Buchanan, and he said that he would like to be here, but he had another meeting at a conflict, he couldn't make it, and that he could be here next week to testify. But he said that really, if you move the primary to June, and then you had the runoff in August, he thinks that would be a workable solution. I just want to pass that along as well. And that's all. Those are my comments.
I've been sitting here and trying to think out the ins and outs of ranked choice voting as opposed to a runoff. Do you think you would get the same? Do you think that you get the same results from either one, or are people going to take the choice in the runoff more seriously when they see which 2 candidates it is, as opposed to a ranked choice situation where it's more hypothetical and people may not think very hard about who their second choice is? That's, Mr. Chairman, that's the question I'm turning over in my mind. I can't figure it out, and I'd sure like to know what he thinks.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to talk about that. I really believe that it would increase turnout significantly, because yet you're exactly right. We have such a bifurcated, a diluted race usually, and who's going to win, who knows. But this would actually, in our state, and you guys know this, we're arguably a one-party state. So whoever wins the primary, just 9 times out of 10, is going to win that general election, right? And this would actually expedite things, and people would get pretty excited. And it would be nice if we had 2 candidates. Then you could have real debates instead of a beauty pageant where you get a dozen people that come up and speak for 15 seconds. You'd actually be able to hear both candidates on the policy issues in a debate on NPR and elsewhere, and you could really do a deep dive with them.
I'm trying. I have kind of a bit of an odd question. Other countries run elections in a much shorter time period. Great Britain, for example, they have their parliamentary elections. I guess they have a blow up and then they say, well, we're going to call for elections, and they get her done in like maybe less than 2 months, maybe even less than that. And, you know, it has a lot of participation by people. Here, we kind of do the opposite. We start campaigning for president already, for example, and then we have a very, very long period of time. And we are a very heavily media-driven nation now. And so I think voters feel a little bit beat down by the whole turmoil and the, I don't know quite how to say it, but it seems like it's just gotten crazy. I can't say it any more than that. And are we taking the crazy period and extending it and maybe driving voters to have more fatigue about these elections? And they decide, say in the runoff, they decide something like, you know, my guy didn't make it to the runoff, and I don't care. I'm sick of this election. I just want it over, and they drop out of participating. I don't want that to happen. And how do we keep the intensity? I do appreciate your point that the having two people debate, it could be much higher quality than the debate than the junk we get now. But can you help me that this would be a good thing for voters to extend out this pain and suffering that we're going through now? I mean, it's a crazy, silly, hellacious season, and I think it wears people down.
We do. You raise a good point that elections don't seem to ever stop. You're always running now. You guys know that in your own legislative seats. But I think that we would see increased participation. We have an engaged electorate, and they get diluted. They look at the governor's race. We had 6 people that at one point had a shot to win that. I also like your idea. I do like the idea of shortening it to the minimum amount of time that we can for each cycle. I would like the general election to be as short as it could be. And then I'd like that runoff section to be as short as it can be, and as well as the primary to be as short as it can be. That is a great idea. You as the legislature should entertain that. I like that. It'd be a great bill.
Chairman, I'm going to make one comment from the point of view of a candidate on that one. I really like to campaign door to door because it's a chance for me to go around and visit the people I represent in person, talk to them in their own friendly setting, and I get I think a much better feel of what my constituents really want by doing that. And if you shorten it too much,
right,
then I lose that. And
those are things we have to flesh out. And 3 months is it seems to be a workable timeframe, wouldn't you say?
Oh, it's Mr. Chairman, 3 months, yes.
So I was really referring to the general being shorter. We could shorten that. Couldn't we, in theory, shorten that to 45 days and keep the runoff at 45 days? You'd have a 90-day window there for those 2 elections. And then you preceded by a primary that was 3 months. There's lots of ways it could work. Thank you. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. You got to forgive the hat here, Mr. Chairman. I know you can relate. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to testify. My name is Cassie Craven, and I'm representing the Wyoming Liberty Group here today before you regarding this runoff bill. First and foremost, just as kind of a housekeeping mechanism, I emailed you all this morning, and I apologize for the tardiness of that, but it was as quick as I could get it. Some possible amendments for the campaign finance code that would fall into line with what this bill seeks to do for your consideration. So I won't walk you through those any more than to say that with regard to 22-25-102, the contribution of funds or election assistance restricted limitation on contributions, right to communicate civil penalty provision, that I added in 3 amendments you'll see there, and it's very simple. It just incorporates the runoff election provision. On and in support of this bill today, wanted to touch base on a couple things. First of all, this was not originally a bill necessarily that we were heavily involved with as an organization, but upon it coming out, received a lot of correspondence, a lot of communication from people, and it was very eye-opening, to be honest, what people really thought. We spend a lot of time, I think, talking about voter suppression and who's not voting, but unfortunately, we don't often speak as much about the people who are every single time. And this last year, we saw, the kind of effects of not having a bill like this, and globally what that does, what our electeds really do. They appoint people who make decisions over our lives, decisions over our businesses. And there's a lot of people who feel like the people that got elected, that it wasn't fair because it wasn't a majority of the voice, and that some of these appointees are completely contrary to the policy positions, I believe, of many of your constituents, to be quite honest. I've had conversations all over this state with people who are fed up. They don't think it's fair. They don't think it's representative. And so I think that that point shouldn't be lost on anyone. But also, I would agree with the previous testimony that I think you're going to see a lot more voter turnout under a system like this. People are going to be excited. They're going to be more involved. They're going to feel like the party is more unified, because if you look at the history of why runoff elections came to be, it was after the South, and it was a form of trying to unify and trying to get the most moderate candidate, if you will, on the floor, the candidate that the most people could back. That was the whole point of the thing. And so I think that shouldn't be lost on us either. And we definitely shouldn't couch what we're going to do behind things like HR 1 on the federal level. We should not follow the lead of a federal administration that we don't know what direction they're going. We should do everything we can to protect us as a state in Wyoming. So I think that that's a key point. I did a lot of looking at ranked choice voting, and I'm glad I did, because we've pivoted the conversation today pretty significantly. The studies I've reviewed out of Alaska, Maine, there's a lot of literature. I don't think that's the answer for us. I think they're very expensive. I think the tabulation process is extremely difficult. The auditing process is even more difficult. What is a clerk to do if somebody numbers, 1 all the way down and skips 2? And those things will happen. And we don't have answers to those questions. There's a reason they do it in New Zealand and not in the majority of these United States. I think that the data is pretty clear on that. So I don't want to get into the weeds too much, other than to say that I think this bill is really the voice of fairness and equity. We would not be opposed to writing out the legislature, because I believe that's not the call of our organization. We've received far more comments about federal offices, the governorship. That's what we're worried about. And I think the clerk data backed up, it's so rare that it would come up in a legislative race anyway, that we're not going to die on that hill, to be quite frank. And to a couple of the points addressed, the timing issue, whatever is workable. I think that the idea is there, and I think that this should definitely see the floor for some good discussion. I think your constituents would really, really appreciate that. So with that, I'd happily stand for any questions, and I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Willix, I serve as a county commissioner, but I want to clear I'm here on behalf of myself and as a past Wyoming Republican Party chairman. I think the premise of this bill is based on a false premise, and that's that our election system is broken. I don't believe our election system is broken. I'll be honest, nobody has come to me and said it doesn't work. We have used this method of election in Wyoming, as far as I know, since statehood. And so I do stand in oppose of this and of ranked choice, because I believe our system works. I fully believe in the integrity of our voters, the integrity of our system, and the integrity of our results. And I don't think anybody can disagree with that. I sit around and laugh at runoffs in other states. Think about this. If we didn't have a runoff in Georgia, the Republicans would control the United States Senate right now, and think how much different that would be for Wyoming right now. The policies that we want to fight, we would have a majority in there instead of a minority. So I'm not sure that it always brings the results that have been talked about. The other thing is extends the campaign season into the legislative session, if you go with the 3 elections, and puts an incredible different dynamic onto the people that serve in this building. It also means that with a 3rd race, you are narrowing the field of candidates, that those that are wealthy or that can raise enough money, because a special election, as we have seen in other places, is extremely expensive because of either the time frame or another election on top of things. So I believe this is a solution looking for a problem. I do not believe that Wyoming has that issue. At a minimum, if this bill moves forward, I would recommend lowering that threshold below 50% to something like 35, so you at least don't create more and more opportunities to create extra elections. Our system is simple, it's straightforward, the voters understand it, there's no additional education needed. You go in and vote for the candidate you believe in. I think that's democracy at its purest level. And then as far as mandates, the majority of people select the final candidate. At the general election, that's what happens. And we have elected people from both parties. Our chief executive has been from both parties in recent history. So I don't believe that this particular issue is one that is a dynamic that has a lot of concern out there. There are people that are, I'm not dismissing that, but I think there's a silent majority out there that is very happy with our system as it extends. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I do not believe this bill or ranked is actually a path forward for us. I believe in our system as it exists and encourage you to keep it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I sit, as somebody says, for any questions instead of stand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Pleasure.
Move the bill.
Bill is moved, discussion in the committee. Senator Bowman.
Mr. Chairman, obviously I'm a co-sponsor on this bill. I think that it improves our elections, but I'm also very cognizant of the technical work that has to be done. I don't think the bill as it stands right now is workable from all of the testimony that we've heard. I'm going to try and make it workable. So on page 18, the effective date for sections 1 and 2, I would move that we strike July 1st, 2022 and insert January 1st, 2023. And the idea there, I mean, if you go and look through page 9, for example, we're removing dates, say, for petitioning to form a political party, for example, that are right now the deadline's April 1st of this year. We're moving it to January 1st. So with this bill, we're actually moving pieces that are currently, we're in the middle of that timeline. So I just don't think that the timing is appropriate, and we have to have a bill that actually works. So I think this is the key to actually get it to move forward.
July is kind of our standard date. You want to do January?
Yep, January 1st, 2023.
Is that
That's a motion to amend.
There's not January 1st of what year?
2023.
Any further discussion on it? I'm going to go ahead and ask for the vote, but we may redo if it's split votes. I don't expect Senator Case.
Question.
All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, the amendment's passed. We're back on the bill. Any further amendments? I do have one. I would propose that we put the appropriation in it for, I'm going to do a placeholder of 1.5 million. I'm not going to leave. I've got tax and county commissioners that don't want to pay for the elections. They don't want the counties to pay for them. I'm going to go ahead and put the appropriation in.
Mr. Chairman. So that would be a new section 3 on page 18, line 11, and just use our standard appropriation language as appropriated for the general fund for the purposes of this act. 1.5 million.
Staff, but I think $1.5 million from what we've heard.
Yeah.
might leave it a little bit short, but there's really concern out of my district on, they feel like we beat them up enough, so. Discussion? Questions? All in favor? Okay. Do you have the language on that good enough, or are you able to do it?
No, I don't have that language.
So it would be for $1.5 million, and we'll give latitude to staff for an appropriation to cover costs of runoff.
If
I
you-
don't think we can do that in committee meeting. We have to be very specific.
No, and Mr. Chairman, I think on this one, we know there's very standard language for a general fund appropriation. And we tell them how much it is. LSO can plug that
That's
right
our
in.
vote for
With the
it.
fiscal note, right?
Yeah, fiscal.
Yeah.
So Judy, we're gonna do a fiscal note adding 1.5 million
No.
from the general fund.
Chairman,
Senator Scott.
not a fiscal note, appropriation was the motion.
It's an appropriation.
The fiscal note will reflect an appropriation of 1.5 million from the general fund. Yeah, I think we're talking about the same thing.
Very good.
So I just want to be clear. We're going to add a fiscal note, adding $1.5 million.
An appropriation, it'll actually be a line on page 18,
Right.
and it will appropriate from the general fund $1.5 million. There's some standard language that the lawyers will pick up for you. But I think everybody in the room knows that it's standard. It's just what we do normally. That'll leave our counties whole. If you need help on it, I'll go catch staff. And I'm happy. Committee comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, we also have a backup then that it'll have to go to appropriations. And if we don't get the standard language right, they will.
They will. Senator Case, we've done 2 amendments. One, we moved an acting date to January 1, 2023. We passed that without you. We just added
Oh, it's so bad.
we just added a $1.5 million appropriation on it to cover the county costs. And that is passed in your absence. We're now back on the bill. Discussion. Seeing none, questions, roll call.
Senator Boner,
Aye.
Senator Case,
Aye.
Senator Nethercott. Senator Scott,
No.
Chairman Driscoll.
Aye.
Uh,
Thank
Mis-
you very much, Senator Biteman. Regardless where it goes, it's a great idea, and I think you're going to get something out of it that's workable. I hope that the rest of the body treats you as well. So thanks for the hard work, and thank all of you for coming.
And Mr. Chairman, I think with the delayed enacting date, it doesn't preclude other ideas from coming forward and taking its place.
Appreciate your humor on it. I think everybody's already taken their breaks during the bill, so we'll move on to only me and Senator Scott don't have to have our mics on. We're exempt, we're loud. So we will now go to Senate File 78. Which see it. I don't have it. We don't have 78 in the,
It's attached to the amendment.
oh, okay, got it. Okay, Senator Pappas, you have the floor. Introduce yourself and please present the bill. Welcome to Senate Corps.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Stephan Pappas, Senate District 7. Today I bring to you a very simple bill that deals with continuing education requirements for real estate appraisers. And this is a simple bill, just a cleanup bill to help them with the continuing education requirements. As you'll see, I'll just get right into the bill and it'll be pretty self-evident of what we're doing. Page 1 on line 14, we're striking the number of hours that is set in statute, the 30 hours for continuing education. And then we're letting them be established by the board. Hours change, federal requirements for continuing education change, and taking them out of statute would help the board just keep up with it on a timely basis. So they're still requiring continuing education. It's just the number of hours is going to be set by the board. And if you'll see there, we're also including remote and remote hours of live instruction. Now, I do have an amendment to remove the word live because that was some language that they were looking at prior to COVID-19, and now they've got some pretty robust non-live education that is available for real estate appraisers. So, but the key there is having remote education. So that's added. Then on page 2, you'll see that the instruction at the end of page 1 and beginning of page 2 is the instruction established by the board rules consistent with federal requirements. Key issue because this industry is very federally regulated. And then finally, if you look on lines 3 and 4 on page 2, the courses or seminars that the board approves for continuing education credit shall include 1 board approved and 7 hours of national USPAP updated courses. Basically, that language was in there. It's just now giving the board approval of those courses. So that not every course is available. The board will have to be able to approve the course in order for it to be used as continuing education. So fairly simple bill. And again, hopefully you have the amendment to strike the word live. I sit for any questions. It's a pretty self-explanatory bill.
Quicker than I expected, Senator Pappas. Questions,
Yeah,
Senator Nethercott? Okay, questions? Okay, could we let in Zish, Miss Zish? I hope I didn't butcher that. Okay.
No, you did.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Zish, and I am the Executive Director of the Wyoming Real Estate Commission and Certified Appraiser Board. As Senator Pappas has stated, this is a pretty simple bill. It really is a cleanup bill to ensure that the commission is more adept at responding to federal changes. As he stated, it is a highly regulated industry. And so recently, the federal level has changed the continuing education requirements from 30 to 28 hours. And so that's how this bill came about, is that there was indeed a federal change. And so we looked to our statutes that had a different number of hours and saw essentially the need or the desire for the commission to be able to be more flexible and more adaptable to the federal level of regulation. And to be able to institute what was already established at the federal level. Noting the removal of the live instruction, the commission would have concerns if that word was still in there. We have about 400 appraisers that we regulate. And right now, the federal level regulation and approvers, they do allow for essentially online courses that are not live or live streamed. They have a lot of requirements. We usually do not approve courses unless they have been approved at that federal level, but including the word live in this case would mean that the commission could not approve most of the hours that current appraisers have taken that have been vetted through that federal level. So just a quick summation. Again, this would just allow the commission to be more adept and responsive to complying with the federal level regulations, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I didn't have my mic on. Further testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lori Urbicate with the Wyoming Realtors, and we're in strong support of this bill and strong support of the amendment that would remove the word live. Just to remind you, any of the federally insured or guaranteed loan mortgages that the majority of our buyers that need mortgages utilize in Wyoming currently have to have an appraiser that has these kind of certifications. We don't get to pick and choose what we do. It is a federal rule, and our appraisers have to be comply with that federal law. And it makes a lot of sense for us to take the actual numbers out of statute, allow the commission to regulate that up or down, whichever way the feds decide to go this next year or next week or when the wind blows. So we appreciate this bill and would urge your support. Happy to answer any questions I can.
Thank you. Question from Ms. Urbicate. Seeing none. Thank you. Any further testimony in the audience? None left online. If you do, raise your hand.
To pass.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, move the amendment.
Amendment's been moved. Questions called. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. Looks like a railroad job here. Roll call, please.
Senator Bonner,
Aye.
Senator Case,
Aye.
Senator Nethercott,
Aye.
Senator Scott,
Aye.
Chairman Driscoll.
Aye.
Okay, Senate File 78 passed as amended.
Thank you. Next, we will have Senate File 142. Welcome, Senator Steinmetz. This isn't a bill, this is a book.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. And it is just a little bill, and thank you for giving your good appropriations committee more work as well. Committee and chairman, this is just a simple little bill that was brought to us by the Secretary of State, who was concerned in some of the last election cycle with some of the private funds he was seeing infused into other states. And so obviously in the good state of Wyoming, we have not had this issue. I provided you some articles about what has happened in some other states. So for your review. So basically just reading this, and I forgot my glasses, so I apologize for that. On page 1, the new language would just be notwithstanding any other provision of law, the state and each political subdivision or government entity that conducts and oversees elections in this state shall not accept or expend private donated funds for registering voters or for preparing for, conducting, or overseeing an election. And that's pretty much it. And then we did provide an amendment to you as well that would give us an exemption. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Senator Steinmetz, my apologies. The book is Senator Scott's bill that was stapled underneath yours.
Oh, all right.
I was in terror. When I picked this up, and how is she going to do a 100-page
goodness.
bill?
All right. Well,
So,
I wasn't
my
sure
apologies
what-
on giving you grief about writing a book for this. And you,
Yes.
by the way, you got through the book very quickly.
Thank you.
Questions
It was
for Senator
just a
Steinmetz?
small paragraph.
Questions?
Uh,
See,
Mr.
Senator Nethercott.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Steinmetz, there is an amendment. Is
Yes,
that
I
right?
had provided Senator Nethercott with the amendment. Would you like me to read that, or would you like to deal with that?
If you would just quickly explain it, and then we'll vote on it once we work the bill.
Sure. So what this does is there are some functions where people provide meals or do some different things when elections are being conducted. And so it basically goes into page 2, line 3, and it just says the Secretary of State and county clerk in each county may accept and expend private donated funds to educate the public on election participation and for any expense associated with election training. So that's just the exemption and makes it a little clearer.
Thank you. Good amendment. Any questions on the amendment?
Can we have questions on the bill too?
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah.
I already did that. You passed on it, so you can go now.
Well, I'm trying to understand with the amendment. I mean, honestly, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't sure what this bill was aiming at. I'm trying to understand what's the problem we're trying to fix, basically. So what are the, for instances, and with the amendment, when she talked about the amendment, it's becoming a little bit clearer, but I do need some more help. Where's that? Is that in our
Mr.
package
Chairman
attached?
and senators.
Another
I did
attachment
provide
on
you a
this?
handout with what this is trying to address.
Okay.
There has been private money used and assertion of a violation of federal election law in some of the states during the election. And as we see budgets tighten and things like that in our state, we just want to protect our state from that same possibility. So, as I said, provided to us by the good Secretary of State, something just to help out, protect the integrity of our Wyoming elections.
So, and Mr. Chairman, I'm still trying to, I'm sorry, I haven't looked at this, but like in my neck of the woods, it's pretty common on election day to have organized efforts by private things to get people to the polls. It's especially prevalent on the Wind River Indian Reservation. It's just, and it involves providing, might involve transportation, meals. I mean, it's a very big event and a lot of people participate, a lot of volunteers. There's obviously some expenditures. Is that what we're getting at? With your amendment, it kind of sounded like that, but I'm still dense about this.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, no, that's not what this is getting at all. There was private money that actually went to county clerks and secretaries of state in other states to actually conduct the election, and it provided the grants that were given, provided parameters on how the election would be conducted. And so, no, it has nothing to do with transportation or any of those ancillary functions. It has to do with an actual state election and the conducting of that election and private funds influencing the election.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, if I understand that, do we know if that's happened in Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Case, according to our good Secretary of State, no, that has not happened in Wyoming, but it is something that he wants to preclude from happening in Wyoming and just put a stopgap measure there so that it's not an option.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator.
Further questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Further testimony. Anyone's in the waiting room, raise your hand. Last chance, anyone in the audience wish to testify? Seeing none, public testimony is closed. What's your pleasure? Bill's moved. Amendment, any amendments? We have one. Would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Discussion on the amendment? Question being called. Everybody in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. It is passed. We're back on the bill. Discussion on the bill.
Mr. Chairman, we
Senator
just passed
Case.
this amendment that allows for the pre-election activity to be funded privately, but yet not the election activity. So I don't get how it fits. So the training of the poll watchers, all these expenses, they're early expenses of the election, but they're not happening on election day. They're expenses of the election that occur before. So am I right on that, or am I just missing something? Something's got me missed on this.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
What it seems to me is that the evil they're trying to get at is that some very wealthy individuals are starting to essentially buy changes in the election rules that they think will favor one particular ideology or partisan candidate over another. And that would be making our elections for sale in a way that is destructive of our democracy and the confidence in our democracy. And I can see how that apparently is happening elsewhere. I I think in principle, it's a good thing. I think it is not a particular threat in Wyoming in the foreseeable future. We're sufficiently overwhelmed that I think that the people that espouse this kind of cause aren't going to come here. Whether it could be done in a primary election, trying to influence a partisan primary, I don't know whether we're at risk for that or not. I'd have to think about it. It hasn't been tried here, as far as I know.
No, that's what is that? Senator Boner.
Yeah, just I think there is a distinction. If you look on page 2, line 2, and talk about actually the conduction of the election, and assuming that there's strings attached to the money, whereas the amendment simply deals with educating and, kind of get out the vote type of campaign. So I think that is a clear distinction and one that's appropriate to make.
Maybe, but Mr. Chairman, I just make the point that preparing for an election involves training, having people come. There's a lot of expense in that phase. That seems to be allowed to have the private funds, but yet apparently the actual direct expenses, the election day expenses, no. So I'm having a little trouble reconciling that. But
Senator Nathaniel.
Mr. Chairman, why, Senator Case? I hear your concern.
because my brain is stupid.
No. No, really, what are you seeing on the ground that you're thinking of that might be prohibited or concerned about? How can we fix it?
I'm not sure. So I wish the county clerk would address this, but they have lots of activities
They're here.
up until the day of the election that cost money, that involve rounding up poll workers, training them to implement the election. They go out and register people to vote. That's a pre-election activity. They, there's just a host of stuff. Listen to the clerks, they'll tell you that it's a big job. And, the election day is sort of, it's not anticlimactic in any sense, but a lot of work has already gone into it on the day of the election, including a lot of expenditures and a lot of effort.
Or get you a little expert testimony. Can we get either Ms. Bartlett or Ms. Freeze or both admitted into the room, and we'll catch their opinion on this. Welcome, Ms. Freeze. And Ms. Lankford and Ms. Bartlett, whoever would like to.
You got the big town trio.
Welcome. We got the heavy hitter club here. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, Mary Langford, representing the County Clerks Association, and our other two clerks are at the table as well. To talk about expenses to prepare for the election with training of election judges and all of that kind of thing, all of that cost now is borne by the county. That's part of the election budget. The numbers that we presented in the last bill, that 1.1 million is the preparation for the election. Purchasing the ballots includes the cost of training the judges, producing the materials that they need for that training, and paying, expense for that. They get some mileage for coming to the meeting and that type of thing.
Good. Questions? Thank you, Ms. Langford. Committee, we're back on the bill.
So, Mr.
Senator Case.
I guess that point is that a lot of the election expenses are exactly what the amendment exempts.
It allows for.
I don't.
It exempts from the prohibition. Is what I'm. May accept and expend private donated funds to educate the public on election participation and for any expense associated with election training. That's like the upfront costs. So that's okay. Anyway.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, we've had a long history in this state of small private donations, often just takes the form of food treats brought to the election officials, where the populace is saying thank you to these people for what they do. in supporting the elections and helping run them. And that's innocent to be welcomed, and we shouldn't try to prohibit it. But we're concerned that somebody who's very wealthy will come in and try to buy an election by buying changes. I think that the bill is headed in the right direction, but Mr. Chairman, I'm not convinced we've really got the ability to distinguish between the very innocent and very welcome things that have gone on forever and the evil we're trying to prevent. I'm not sure that the language actually distinguishes well enough. I think it's a topic, it's well to get the thing in place before somebody does it, but I'm not quite sure we're ready.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Freeze, can you unmute? Sorry, I didn't.
Mr. Chairman, so I'm speaking just for myself as a county clerk. So when we talk about getting funds from private sources to do what we're talking about here, I personally, as a county clerk, I am not interested in that. And kind of for the same reasons that Senator Scott said. You know, we might be elected under a party, but we try to tell you guys and legislators all the time, our whole job, especially with elections, we have to be so very nonpartisan. So we come into these jobs and we're working for all the people of our counties in the state of Wyoming. And so I am not likely to take, even if it was allowed to me, take any private funds to do what I should be doing in my job anyway. My job is to educate people on how to get their ballots, how to get registered, how to do all of those things, how to get election judges. I do that here in Fremont County on a regular basis. So me personally, I'm just speaking for me, I am not interested in any kind of private funds. I've even worked with some groups lately who say they are nonpartisan, and I really don't think they are. And I'm very less likely to even partner with some of those folks in the next coming election, because I want to make sure that every person who votes and all the candidates know that my job is very nonpartisan and I'm doing it as part of my job. And I just wanted to throw that out there. I know Mary told you that we do pay for it by the county. We know, in my opinion, I think that's part of our responsibility. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Question for Senator Case.
Ms. Freeze, thank you. It's good to see you. Wouldn't we be better off passing this bill without the amendment? Should we reconsider the amendment, which sort of makes an exception for the upfront?
You know, I just don't see any need for this. So I guess if that's what the amendment is to allow us to do that, then I would say no. And this is just me, again, me personally. I've not talked to other county clerks. In fact, we didn't quite understand how this would affect us. We were kind of confused with the whole bill, so we really didn't even take a vote on it.
Thank you. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to reiterate, this was brought to us by our good Secretary of State, is where the bill originated. He has some functions where there's some food provided to his office. So if we want to dispense with this amendment for now and go back and get clarification as to why he felt this was necessary, we sure can, and move the bill forward without the amendment. I would be amenable to that. I think we have a bigger issue to solve here than, people bringing cookies in during an election. So thank you, Mr.
I think
Chairman.
we're good. We've moved the amendment. We can deal with it on the floor if we need to. We've got some time. Senator Case.
Yeah, we don't really have to do anything. We could vote against the amendment on the floor.
Correct.
And here it is. I'm just not hitting on all cylinders this morning, and I really apologize. But I thought the testimony was that the Secretary of State wanted the bill, but the Secretary of State wanted the amendment. Both. Okay, both. Okay, thank you.
Very good. Further comments, committee? Further comments? Question, roll call.
Just for clarification for me, we're taking this bill with the amendments right now,
With
correct?
amendments. We passed the amendment. This for the bill.
Okay. Senator Boner,
Aye.
Senator Case,
Aye.
Senator Nethercott, Senator Scott, Chairman Driscoll.
Aye.
So Senate File 142 passes as amended with 4 ayes and 1 no.
Committee, we have 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and take the next bill up and start. We do. And I'm not sure if we can get it done in that, but I think there's a chance. So next bill will be Senate File 28. Welcome.
Chairman Driscoll, members of the committee, Scott Meyer with the Wyoming Bankers Association. We had brought this subject up a year ago, and during the budget session, it got a little bit difficult. So we brought it up again in this session, and I don't know if you would like to have a really quick summary of why we're trying to make this change. I think most everybody was involved with that, but in the event that you don't, I can certainly do that very
I think
quickly.
every person in this committee, last one, was here last year,
Right.
myself included. So, yeah, Senator. I was here. I was actually one of the ones that caused a lot of grief on it.
So if you would
proceed.
like, I can give you a quick summary of why we want this. What is happening is that with respect to the vehicle lien statutes, the liens are being put onto the vehicles once the county clerk has recorded. And that's when the effective date of that security interest is made. We've had some instances where, unfortunately, people have been slow in bringing stuff up to the county clerk, or the county clerk has been overwhelmed with, like sickness, people out of the office, or workloads, to the point where in very few select cases, the liens are being put onto the vehicles after 30 days. And in some cases, and in very few select cases, there are individuals that have declared bankruptcy. That security interest is not effective for the bankruptcy court because it's after 30 days. It doesn't mean that the debt goes away, but the debt is unsecured. So for all intents and purposes, the vehicle goes away with it without having any recourse. So this bill that we have tried to put up is one that changes the effective date, that when a properly tendered title is brought in with the properly tendered, the VIN inspections, the right fees, the proper security agreement, or what have you that's with it, that the lien becomes effective as of the day it's brought in. And that way it alleviates some of the problems that we are seeing, that some of these things get pushed out for days on end. Like I say, I will tell you that those are the exceptions, not the rule. I think our county clerks do a fine job. The one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention this morning is, we did this work through this on the interim committee, and we had a bill we thought was a very good bill. And my credits also go to Representative Stith, who helped work with the lenders, worked with the automobile dealers, worked with the county clerks, and we came up with a bill. And that's the one that is online right now that you can see. I don't know why, but it's almost like, two lawyers that can't get along on whatever. They have to always keep tweaking these things. And so this bill has been tweaked about 100 times, it seems like, but literally probably half a dozen times since the end of February or end of January. So what I have handed out to you is a red line strikeout of what the automobile dealers, the lenders, and pretty much the county clerks have agreed to. But I will tell you that I've also given you a handout that came from the county clerks as of about 6:30 last night. So to that extent, if you want to take another day to work through some of these things, I'm happy to go through things line by line. I'm happy to do whatever it is, but it has been to the point now where I'd like to get something done on this thing. And the longer you keep us out here, the more changes we're going to make on this thing. And I would like to have that stopped.
Thank you. I think you've done good work. Like I said, I tormented you last year a little bit. This is, and I think from my end, and I'll take a little grief, basically we have a substitute bill here, and that's the way we should treat it probably. Is a substitute bill. And I think it's simpler for the body rather than try to mend it in, is for us to go ahead and introduce a substitute bill, which I intend to do without objection from the committee.
Sure. Well, can we have it drafted and look at it?
It's right here.
It's drafted.
No, but Mr. Chairman, I'm holding that.
Okay.
I wonder if we could have it drafted in proper form.
We're at 9:50, so we will do that. I think barring objection, we're not gonna get the bill done anyway.
That was my thought as well,
So
Mr.
we'll pass this on because we're about out of days. You will be first up on next Tuesday, and we'll have a substitute bill drafted and ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my only comment is that if you have a couple minutes, if the county clerks wanted to say something, they certainly should, because there is a little, I put out on their behalf, a copy of here. They would like to make another change to paragraph B, and I don't know why, and I have not discussed it with them, but I wanted to make sure you had everything in front of you. So if you're going to put it in the right format, whether you want this new paragraph be in there or not, I don't know. I have not had time to really digest it.
So this came out of the interim, I assume. I was not there. Is the committee comfortable with doing this substitute this way?
Can we hear from the clerks first?
They're not here. Oh,
They are, they're back. Welcome. Whoever wants, Mary or Julie.
Mr. Chairman, this is Julie Freeze, Fremont County Clerk. So the last, I think that we sent the other night, we have gone back and forth on this. So just in a nutshell, if I may, we understand that the auto dealers and the Bankers Association want to have their lien filed, not recorded, filed faster than it is now. And so when they bring it in, we asked, we can do that. If you bring in a completed title, a completed application, we have the money, we have everything we need to make the title, we'll do that. And we'll agree to stamp on that UCC document when it is in that format. Now, the newest rendition there says that we will then immediately put that information on the title. And we have been asking the whole time, please don't make us put it on immediately. We're going to get it on there, but people have 60 days to pay their sales tax. So why are we doing that immediately? Why do we have to do that immediately? If I get 100 of these at 4:30 in the afternoon, I'm not paying overtime, or I may have to if this passes, I guess, for these folks to get them on there. Where if I didn't have to do it right then I could do it the next day and it still would have yesterday's date for filing, or 2 days from now, it still would have the correct date. And that was my understanding for perfection, is that they want to have the stamp on the document, which I think we can definitely accommodate that. We know that that's what the whole conversation has been. So we're just wondering if we can take out that word immediately. I think there was like I said, there was an amendment, I believe, that Mary sent to them, and she could probably address that a little bit better than I'm doing right now. But we're just asking that it not be immediately, because I don't know why that's necessary. We're going to wait for people to pay sales tax, probably in most cases anyway.
I guess I've got a question. I get the sales tax in, but I also get perfecting a lien, and to leave a hole in the date on it for 60 days leaves room for a lot of mischief, the way I see it. So you're printing a new title the way I'm used to seeing it. Is it a problem when they print the title to go ahead and note that there's a lien on it? Does that create a hardship?
So, Mr. Chairman, so there's a lot of different ways to do this and a lot of different systems that we work under. I know in your county, with the DocuPro system, apparently the way that works is it brings up the title and then you do the filing and you can do it concurrently that way. A lot of the way I do, and I'm a larger county, and Mr. Meyer has been in my office and watched this operation, but we get a lot of documents in here, and I had been running it through my UCC clerk. So she makes sure that she has everything she needs. She would be the one saying, okay, we've got the right title, we've got everything we need, and we would stamp it. But I may not be able to get to that, which would be my title clerks, because we have a different system, to do that for 2 days, a week, or whatever, but it's still going to have that receipt date on it. What was happening before is if I did the same method that I'm talking about, I may not get it filed for a week. And we're going to fix that. So when it comes in and it's fine, stamping it, it's always going to be on the title with the day that we found that we had everything we needed to do that filing. So I don't know why it has to be immediately that I put it on the title, because we're not a title holding state. So people don't, I mean, the banks aren't wondering where all these titles are that are in the sales tax file. So I don't know why we have to do that immediately. Why can't we just make sure we get that file date on it?
I guess, and I'll go back, so in case I'll get to you in a second,
No
we're about
worries.
out of time. So to me, the title is the title, and if it doesn't have a note on it and it goes out the door without anything on it, there's a hole in ownership on that they can go actually sell that without showing a lien on it. And that's where I see it at, is because if you physically hold the title for a week, I have no problem with that. But whenever the person gets a hold of that title, the lien's got to be noted on it, the way I see it. Maybe I'm missing something here, but
So
I don't care if you hold it for a week, but it has to, when someone physically gets a hold of it.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, that's exactly what's going to happen. So I'm just saying, so let me give you 2 examples. So today, somebody drops off some stuff and everything looks good. And we file the liens, we stamp them, we put the date on the titles, we got them done. We put them in the sales tax drawer 99% of the time, just so you know, they're not going out the door. But if you come in at 4:30 today and you bring me 100 of those and I say, okay, I can get those done first thing tomorrow, and the girls are, and we've talked about this as clerks, is we're going to hurry and go through that and look the best we can to say, yep, they look good. Even if I have to do it tomorrow morning and look through it and say, yeah, they look good. That was yesterday. We're going to stamp them with yesterday's date, and we're going to work on them just as soon as we can. And again, they're not going out the door. Even if the customer is here and says, hey, I'm paying sales tax, they're not getting the title anyway. It goes to the lien holder. Again, although we're not a title holding state, that's the practice. So they're not going anywhere. There's never a hole with that because they're all together. I mean, there's a requirement in the statute that once we do file that and once we do get it on the title, we have 2 days to get a copy to the lien holder. That's just a function of our office that we're doing right now. As soon as I do that title, we're making a copy, we're putting it in the lien holder's file or mailing it out to them so they know it has been done, it is on the title, and it's sitting here waiting for them to pay sales tax. So I don't know what the concern is about them going out the door. They're not going to be going out the door because it's a whole process that we do.
Perfect. Yeah, you've explained it well to me. We're out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up. We'll be back with substitute bill on Tuesday. You'll be first up. Thank you, and sorry we got a break, but we're really trying to push to get these through.
Mr. Chairman, all I would say is that I don't have a problem with immediate. It's a choice of words, whether it's concurrent or immediate. So if you draft it that way without it, I'm okay. Everybody's on the same page as to when it becomes effective.
There's a problem with the substitute bill, and that if you have a substitute bill, that's going to be the standing committee amendment, and then you're going to try to further amend it. So they ought to work it out first before we have the substitute bill drafted, or LSO is going to have a fit.
Okay.
We'll be in agreement with them.
Thank you.